Hey there, drowsy historian here. Tonight, we're stepping into the shadowed halls of Imperial China, a place where the walls are high, the whispers are sharp, and the most powerful man in the empire is surrounded by servants who no longer qualify as men at all. This isn't the tale of noble scholars or elegant tea ceremonies. No, tonight you are a eunuch, a body made useful by subtraction, a voice that exists only to say, "Yes, Your Majesty." You've been mutilated, silenced, and repurposed, all for the privilege of standing very still next to someone more important than you. Before you start picturing silk robes and quiet dignity, go ahead and like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy being gently dragged through humanity's darker corners. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's oddly comforting to know we're all losing sleep over history together. Now close your eyes, take a slow breath, and prepare to spend your life inside a palace that smells like incense, betrayal, and the slow rot of forgotten ambition. You're not a eunuch yet, not quite. That comes later, after the blade. For now, you're just someone unlucky enough to be standing at the edge of a decision that wasn't yours. Maybe you're a boy sold by desperate parents, or a man condemned to a life with no other options. Maybe you volunteered, if we're being generous with that word. But the truth is you were chosen, and what you were chosen for is to lose something. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, physically. Castration. Cleaned up in modern English, it sounds like a clinical procedure, something done in a sterile room, with consent forms and anesthesia. But this isn't a modern story, this is Imperial China, and the procedure isn't carried out in a hospital. It's done in a rented room behind a shop, or in the corner of someone's courtyard. There's no white coat, just an old man with a knife, a bowl, and a towel that hasn't been washed in years. If you're lucky, the knife is sharp. If you're really lucky, the man holding it has steady hands. The process is straightforward, in the same way falling downstairs is straightforward. You're stripped, held down, and told not to scream. Not because screaming is discouraged, but because it's expected, and they'll just ignore you anyway. They tie your legs together. They tie your arms down. Someone stuffs a rag in your mouth. Someone else holds your head still. Then it begins. There are different techniques depending on the dynasty, the region, and how squeamish your handler is. In most cases, everything goes. Penis, testicles, the works, sliced off in one careful motion if the surgeon is skilled. If not, it's more of a tug-and-saw affair. The stump is cauterized or packed with herbs or left open to the air, depending on how sadistic or indifferent your handler is feeling that day. They might insert a plug, a small bamboo tube, pushed into your urethra to keep it from sealing shut. If they forget it or place it poorly, you'll die screaming from infection in about 3 days. Bleeding to death is common. Sepsis is more popular. Shock tends to arrive quickly and doesn't leave politely. There's no real recovery, only survival. If you're strong, your body scabs over and stiffens like old leather. If you're weak, well, at least it'll be over quickly. And through it all, you're expected to be grateful. Not just grateful to survive, but grateful for the opportunity to enter the palace. Grateful to be mutilated into usefulness. They tell you this is a noble sacrifice, that your body is now a vessel of discipline, loyalty, and service. They tell you you've been chosen. What they don't say is that you've just been reshaped into something that the court finds less threatening. Less man, more tool. After the cutting, there's a waiting period. You don't get to enter the palace until it's clear you won't drop dead on the floor. You spend days, sometimes weeks, lying flat on a mat in a rented room, hoping you can still pass water, hoping the swelling goes down, hoping the wound doesn't start to smell. You don't sleep much. You can't. Every position hurts. Every movement stings. and every breath is accompanied by the knowledge that someone else made this decision for you. You will never have children. You will never lie with anyone again, not in the way you used to. You may forget what arousal even feels like. Over time, your body will change. Your voice may rise in pitch. Your muscle mass may shrink. Your bones will thin. Your skin may soften. Some eunuchs grow breasts. Others develop a strange ageless appearance. Faces like melted wax, smooth and pale, like time gave up on them. You will carry these signs with you for the rest of your life. You will never be one of the men again. You will never be one of the women either. You will be something else, and that something else will belong to the Emperor. Once you're strong enough to stand, you return to the man with the knife. He examines your wound. If you're healing well, he gives you a certificate, a crude slip of paper verifying that yes, your parts are gone, and yes, you are now eligible for service. Without this paper, you can't enter the palace. Without this paper, you're just another crippled beggar on the street. So you take the certificate, tuck it into your sleeve, and report to the office of eunuchs. You're one of many. Dozens of others stand in line beside you, all bearing the same dull expressions, the same shuffled stance, the same air of aching vacancy. Some are older, most are younger. None of you smile. The officials don't greet you with warmth. They inspect your certificate, confirm that your wound is real, sometimes with a disturbingly hands-on inspection, and then assign you to training. Training is a generous word. It mostly consists of learning how to walk, bow, and speak like a eunuch. You learn how to suppress emotion, how to maintain perfect posture, how to move in and out of rooms without making a sound. They teach you how to serve tea, how to hold a lantern, how to keep your eyes down, while still noticing everything. You learn quickly, because mistakes are punished, not publicly. They don't want bruises to be seen, but privately, behind doors that don't echo. A wrong answer earns a slap. A spilled bowl earns a whipping. A forgotten honorific might earn a trip back to the surgeon, if they think you need reminding of your place. And through all this, one thing becomes clear. You are no longer a person. You are an object, a function, a necessary thing made from unnecessary parts. The palace doesn't see you. It sees what you represent: obedience, control, the quiet assurance that no man beneath the Emperor will ever sleep with his concubines or challenge his authority. You are the insurance policy, the tool, the symbol. Your name is irrelevant, your past erased. What matters now is that you've paid the price of entry, and that the knife did its job. The moment you step through the palace gates, you stop being a person. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, officially. You are now property, a living asset of the Emperor's household, filed somewhere between the porcelain teacups and the ceremonial umbrellas. There are documents that categorize you, inventory lists that log your arrival, and an administrative code that defines exactly how you're to be used, handled, and, if necessary, disposed of. There's nothing poetic about it. You're not a servant, you're not a subject, you're a tool with legs. Your name, the one you were born with, is replaced or shortened, sometimes stripped away entirely. The man you were before the knife, he's gone. Not dead exactly, just quietly retired by the state. Your family, if you had one, has already been paid or shamed into silence. You can't inherit land, titles, or lineage. You won't pass anything down, because you no longer have anything to pass it with. You are a biological cul-de-sac, a deliberate dead end in the great ancestral road. And that's exactly the point. The palace doesn't need men with ambition or families to protect. It needs obedience. Your life is now defined by proximity. Proximity to power, but never power itself. You exist in the corridors that wrap around the throne, never in the seat itself. You wear silk, but it's stitched from someone else's orders. You walk with dignity, but only as long as that dignity serves the Emperor. You are visible only when needed, and forgotten the moment you step out of sight. Even your rank, Your position, your meagre scraps of authority, all of it is on loan, revocable at a moment's notice, and contingent on your continued usefulness. You're assigned quarters, which sounds generous until you see them. The eunuch dormitories are tucked into the less glamorous corners of the palace. Cramped stone chambers with simple mats, shared wash basins, an air that smells faintly of incense, sweat, and mould. There are no family portraits, no treasured heirlooms, no tokens of love. You can't have a wife, you can't have a child, you can't even keep a pet unless someone higher up allows it. The room is a storage unit. You just happen to sleep in it. The hierarchy is suffocating. You're ranked, categorized, and posted like a piece on a board. One designed for a game you're not allowed to win. There are senior eunuchs, minor eunuchs, chamber eunuchs, laundry eunuchs, food eunuchs, gate eunuchs, and garden eunuchs. Each post has rules, routines, and punishments. Step out of line, and someone notices. Step into someone else's line, and they notice faster. There is no solidarity here, just quiet competition and mutual suspicion. Your fellow eunuchs are not your brothers, they are future rivals. You quickly learn that your body isn't the only thing the palace expects to own. Your time, your thoughts, your loyalty, those are all part of the deal. You don't get sick days, you don't get weekends. You serve when summoned and wait when ignored. You wake before the nobles, sleep after the lamps are extinguished, and eat whatever is left over from the kitchens, often cold, usually bland, and always accompanied by the gnawing knowledge that the emperor's dog probably eats better than you. The officials remind you regularly and politely that your life is a privilege, that many men would kill for the honor of being castrated and locked away in service to the Son of Heaven, that without the palace you'd be rotting in a ditch or starving on a roadside. They speak as if this arrangement is charitable, as if slicing your future away was an act of mercy. And maybe, in a twisted sense, they're right. The palace gives you food, shelter, and a reason to wake up in the morning, even if that reason is mostly fear. Emotion is discouraged. Laughter, anger, even grief, these are considered threats to decorum. You must cultivate neutrality. Your face becomes a blank scroll. Your voice a soft and measured brushstroke. Too loud, and you're reprimanded. Too quiet, and you're accused of sulking. Every moment is a performance. You're not expected to feel. You're expected to function. And if you can't, there's a line of replacements behind you who will. Even your dreams are monitored. Ambition is dangerous. If you reach too far, curry too much favour, speak too boldly, or linger too long in the emperor's gaze, you attract the wrong kind of attention. 1 minute you're trusted, the next you're reassigned to cleaning latrines for disciplinary reflection. In some cases you disappear entirely, your name scrubbed from the rolls, your possessions redistributed, your fate sealed behind a locked garden gate. It doesn't take much. A rumour, a jealous superior, a concubine's complaint. The system doesn't need a reason, only an excuse. There's a ceremony each year, a kind of public audit, where eunuchs are inspected, praised, punished, or quietly replaced. You're expected to bow, smile, and show your gratitude for whatever new assignment you receive, even if it means moving from the archives to the stables, or from the royal kitchens to the sewage channels beneath the bathhouse. Job security doesn't exist here, only temporary usefulness. And yet, despite everything, despite the humiliation, the surveillance, the physical pain, the emotional numbness, there is still a flicker of pride. You serve the emperor. You wear the badge. You walk the sacred halls that most people only dream of glimpsing. You hear state secrets whispered behind silk screens. You see the gears of empire turn from the inside. You are closer to the throne than any general, scholar, or nobleman dares to stand. And in a world where power trickles down through bloodlines and favours, that proximity alone can become its own strange currency. But don't let it go to your head. The palace giveth, and the palace taketh faster. You may be valuable today, Tomorrow, you may be forgotten. The new eunuchs arrive in steady waves, younger, hungrier, quieter. The emperor will never remember your name. The court will never mourn your passing. History will mention you, if at all, as a trusted servant or court official, carefully sidestepping the reality of who you were and what you gave up to be there. You are not your own. You never were. You belong to the emperor, and he never gives back what he owns. At first it's breathtaking. You walk through the main gates and your mouth forgets how to stay closed. The Forbidden City is not just a palace, it's a different planet. Red lacquered walls, dragon-tiled roofs, courtyards the size of villages. There are carved stone bridges, lotus ponds, and walkways so wide they seem built for gods rather than men. Every column is painted, every window etched, every door guarded by someone who looks like they haven't blinked in a decade. It's beautiful, yes, but beauty can lie. And this place is very good at it. Because once the gates shut behind you, you realise something no one ever says out loud. This isn't a home, it's a trap. And you just stepped into it willingly. There's no going back. Not to the world outside, not to a family if you had one. Not to a street corner or a countryside field. The city is forbidden for a reason. It's not just forbidden to outsiders, it's forbidden to you too. You can't leave without permission, and permission is as rare as an honest courtier. You are sealed in, like a message in an envelope that no one ever plans to open. Your daily path is rigid. You don't wander, you follow routes, assigned routes, scheduled ones. You know exactly which corridor leads to which gate, which turns are allowed, and which are punishable. There are entire wings of the palace you will never see, rooms that exist only in rumours, and in the stories the older eunuchs mutter before bed. Every hallway is watched, every gesture monitored. Even the shadows feel like they're taking notes. The smell of incense never leaves the air. It's sweet, cloying, almost sickly, a constant reminder that this place was built to be sacred, not safe. Incense for the ancestors, incense for the gods, incense to cover the stench of ambition and decay. It gets into your clothes, your bedding, your lungs. Eventually, you stop noticing. That's the point. The palace wants you to become part of it. It wants you to dissolve into routine, to forget the smell of the outside world, to forget there is an outside world. And then there's the silence, a strange, heavy kind of silence, the kind that isn't quiet so much as tense. Conversations are always careful, voices hushed, laughter rare. If someone is speaking loudly, it's either because they have power or because they're about to lose it. You never know which until it's too late. And you, being a eunuch, never raise your voice. Not unless ordered to. Not unless you've decided you don't need your position anymore. Or your tongue. The people here, they're polite. Dangerously polite. Smiles like blades, greetings laced with hidden meanings. You'll hear, "May your service be blessed," in the same tone someone might say, "You'll be dead by sunrise." Every cup of tea could be a test. Every request from a superior might be a trap. Someone once said that the most dangerous game in the empire isn't war or politics, it's a dinner party in the Imperial court. You, unfortunately, are part of the catering staff. There's a phrase you learn early. Stillness is survival. It means don't draw attention. It means don't speak unless spoken to. Don't move unless instructed. Don't have opinions, or if you must, don't share them. You are background, ambience, the decorative silence between imperial decisions. When you serve a noble, your hands must be steady, your eyes downcast, your breathing invisible. The art of being unnoticed is the most important thing you'll ever master. And yet, despite all this, people claw their way into this place. They bribe, they lie, they offer their own children, all for a chance at the palace life. Because on the outside, it still looks like glory. From beyond the walls, it appears as heaven on earth, the centre of civilization, the seat of the emperor, the heartbeat of the world. What they don't realise is that heaven, in this case, has a curfew, a dress code, and a body count. Even the architecture is designed to remind you of your place. Doors are deliberately short so you must bow to enter. Rooms are laid out to confuse intruders and the unworthy. Courtyards stretch forever, forcing you to walk slowly, to feel the weight of distance, to understand that every step is a privilege you haven't earned. There are over 8,000 rooms in the Forbidden City. You'll probably only see 6, maybe 10 if you're lucky, and every one of them is cleaner than your conscience will ever be. Security is omnipresent. Not obvious, that would be vulgar, but constant. Guards dressed like shadows. Officials who know your schedule better than you do. Spies disguised as servants. You once heard a rumour that even the birds in the Imperial garden were trained to report suspicious behaviour. It wouldn't surprise you. Nothing surprises you anymore, except how long it takes to stop being surprised. You start to learn how to read people without making eye contact, how to tell who's dangerous by how slowly they speak, how to walk without creaking a floorboard, how to pretend to be invisible while being watched by 20 pairs of eyes. It's exhausting, but you adapt, because adapting is all that's left. The palace doesn't care about your comfort, only your performance. And then one day, you realise something strange. You've stopped looking at the walls as barriers. You've started thinking of them as shelter. You no longer crave the outside world. You no longer miss the sky. You've forgotten what silence sounds like without incense. You've internalized the rules so completely that you enforce them on yourself. You have become a creature of the palace, and like all creatures in cages, you've stopped noticing the bars. This is not freedom. This is not safety. This is not even stability. This is curated obedience, gilded repression, carefully decorated fear. And it is your entire life. But the curtains really are nice. Your first assignment is not glamorous. No one rolls out a red carpet or hands you a scroll of duties written in gold. Instead, someone hands you a stiff bristled brush and points to the floor. That's your kingdom now. The stone tiles of a corridor no one important ever walks through. Your job is to clean them until your hands blister and your back aches and your sweat has polished them smoother than jade. It's not symbolic. It's not character building. It's just menial labour. The kind the higher-ups are too important to do, and the kind they need to know you're willing to endure. In the hierarchy of the palace, you're not even at the bottom. You're somewhere beneath it. The actual bottom is occupied by more senior eunuchs, who are out of favour. You're below them because at least they've been noticed. You're functionally furniture. You're part of the background noise that keeps the palace running. If everything goes perfectly, no one will acknowledge you exist. The best you can hope for on a good day is to be ignored. The ranking system is dense, tangled, and deliberately opaque. Every position has layers. You might be assigned to the kitchens, but not as a cook. No, you'll be the assistant to the assistant who handles the firewood, or you're stationed in the laundry wing, not to wash clothes, but to fold the drying rags that were used to wash the clothes. You don't just serve a superior. You serve the man who serves the man, who serves the man who's allowed to speak to someone important. You're a cog in a cog in a cog, the metaphysical equivalent of a mat under a chair leg. Even tasks that sound straightforward are governed by rules so specific they border on theological. Lighting a lantern isn't just lighting a lantern. There's a correct time, a correct angle, a correct number of breaths to take before you approach the flame. If your timing is off, or your posture imperfect, someone will correct you. Not with a gentle word, but with a bamboo switch. You'll be told it's disciplinary instruction. The welt on your shoulder will have a different name for it. Etiquette is everything. There's an entire manual, longer than most novels, filled with bowing angles, greeting rituals, and speech patterns. You memorize it under threat of punishment, and even if you follow it perfectly, it might not matter. Some officials like to catch you slipping. Others change the rules on a whim, just to see if you're paying attention. One day, it's 2 bows and a step back. The next, it's a bow, a nod, and 3 steps to the left. If you get it wrong, it's your fault. If you get it right but too slowly, it's still your fault. Precision is expected. Mind reading is ideal. You soon realize that the entire hierarchy is built on fear. Not just yours, but everyone's. Your superior is terrified of his superior. That man is terrified of the one above him. And so on, until you reach someone with real power. And even they sleep lightly, because the emperor's mood swings are faster than a monsoon. Fear travels down the chain like boiling oil, and you're at the bottom of the funnel. Everyone needs someone to take their frustration out on. Lucky you. And yet, everyone wants to climb. The promise of promotion is dangled in front of you like a roasted duck, close enough to smell, never close enough to bite. You hear stories of eunuchs who rose from obscurity to become advisors, treasurers, even commanders of palace affairs. What they don't tell you is how many corpses are buried along that path. To move up, you don't just need skill. You need survival instincts, a flawless memory, impeccable timing, and ideally, blackmail material on someone higher up. Gossip becomes your second language. You learn to listen without seeming to listen, to speak in implications and suggestions, never direct accusations. A single whispered comment about someone's missing ledger or too frequent visits to a concubine's chamber can rearrange careers or end them. If you're clever, you learn how to trade information like currency. If you're not, you end up scrubbing chamber pots with a broken hand. The palace does not reward innocence, it rewards discretion and quiet leverage. Some eunuchs resort to bribes, not just money, which you don't have, but favours, a double shift, a favour called in, a discreet tip-off. If you shine someone's boots the right way, they might give you a posting near the kitchens where leftovers are better. If you pass along a note without reading it, you might get transferred to a warmer part of the palace in winter. It's not about loyalty, it's about transaction. You give, you get, you survive. But promotions, real ones, those are rare. They don't come from good service. They come from accidents, vacancies, or palace purges. You move up because someone fell, hard, sometimes literally. You fill a gap left by disgrace, illness, or a quiet disappearance no one is allowed to mention. Climbing the ladder in the Forbidden City isn't about merit. It's about timing, caution, and never being the one who gets blamed when the tea is served too hot. Even the titles are designed to confuse you. You might be called a third assistant to the Eastern Registry, which sounds important until you realise your job is copying names on paper slips that are thrown away each week. Someone else is the first scribe of the Western office, whose main job is to stand beside a shelf and nod during meetings. The hierarchy is deliberately ornamental, impressive from a distance, meaningless up close. And yet, you persist. You tell yourself that enduring is a kind of success, that every week you aren't demoted or publicly flogged is a step forward. You watch others stumble, a misplaced word here, a spilled drink there, and you learn from their bruises. You keep your head down, your mouth shut, and your ears open. You say yes a lot, even when you mean I hate you. You scrub, you bow, you survive. You are now a servant of a servant of a servant. And if you're very careful and very quiet, one day you might be promoted to servant of a servant. Dream big. There's no such thing as sleeping in. You're awake before the palace roosters, before the first hint of sunrise dares to creep over the walls. You wake when you're told, or earlier if you're smart, because being late isn't an option, and late is defined as anything less than perfectly early. There's no bell, no gentle call, just the sound of footsteps in the corridor, the quiet shifting of mats, the rustle of dozens of other eunuchs scrambling to get dressed in the dark. You get one set of robes, faded, functional, and always just slightly too thin for the weather. You rise stiffly. Your body still remembers the cold floor from yesterday. and the day before that. Your knees ache before you've even knelt. Your back is already protesting, your stomach is empty, and your breath fogs the air like smoke. No one speaks, there's nothing to say. You line up, you wash quickly in cold water that bites, and you go. Because somewhere else in the palace, someone important has stirred, and they're going to need help putting on their silk undergarments. And it is your job, your sacred daily obligation, to make sure they don't have to lift a finger while doing it. You enter their chamber quietly. No footsteps, no sudden sounds. You bow, then you kneel, then you wait. You wait for them to acknowledge your presence or not. Sometimes they ignore you entirely. Sometimes they complain that you arrived too loudly. Sometimes they accuse you of being too slow, too fast, too clumsy, or too invisible. It doesn't matter how you perform. The outcome is the same. You apologize, you bow again, and you try harder. Because you're not a servant. You are a living mirror, placed in the room to reflect the glory of the one you're dressing. They wear layers upon layers of embroidered silk. You wear your own skin and a pair of cotton socks that have been patched 7 times. You hold out the robes so they can slide their arms in with as little effort as possible. You smooth the collar, you adjust the sash, you retrieve the shoes with the embroidered soles. You don't speak unless spoken to, and when spoken to, you answer with such syrupy politeness. It would rot your own teeth if you weren't already used to swallowing your pride whole. Then comes the tea, the first serving of the day, and one of a dozen you'll be expected to pour with exacting care. The cup must be placed just so. The temperature must be correct. The presentation must appear effortless. One drop spilled and you might receive a long sigh, a cutting remark, or a backhand across the cheek, depending on the mood of the recipient. You do not react. You nod, apologize, and thank them for the correction. You thank them for hitting you. The rest of the morning is a cycle of kneeling and bowing and apologizing for things that weren't your fault. You clean rooms that don't belong to you, polish brass that doesn't belong to you, arrange furniture you're not allowed to sit on. You are part of the machinery of palace life, and your role is to keep it running smoothly by absorbing the emotional static of your superiors. They are frustrated, you bow. They are bored, you entertain. They are angry, you flinch. Every gesture, every nod, every half-second pause is an opportunity to be punished for existing in the wrong way. By midday, your knees feel like they're packed with gravel. You kneel so often that the skin eventually breaks down, then hardens, then cracks again. Older eunuchs limp everywhere. The joints don't recover. The damage is cumulative and lifelong. There's no reward for suffering through it. No pension, no comfort, no seniority perks, just more kneeling, just slower. The only real benefit of time is learning how to look grateful while you're being degraded. Meals, if you can call them that, are short and strictly scheduled. You don't eat until everyone else has finished. You take what's left, usually rice, sometimes vegetables, occasionally something that once resembled meat. If it's spoiled, you eat it anyway. If it's too little, you wait until the next round. Hunger is considered character building. Complaining is considered insubordination. If you want more, you're welcome to earn it through more bowing, more kneeling, more smiling, while someone tells you your breath offends them. Afternoons are spent running errands through the maze of corridors. You might be sent with a message, or to fetch an object, or to carry an item that will never be acknowledged, but is somehow vital to the functioning of an official's afternoon routine. You're expected to move swiftly, but not too swiftly, quietly, but not suspiciously. If you look tired, someone might report you. If you look too cheerful, someone will report you. There is no correct expression. There is only the illusion of pleasant neutrality, the eunuch's mask. Evenings bring ceremonies. If you're assigned to assist, it means more bowing, more kneeling, more pretending you're not freezing or exhausted or about to pass out. You hold incense trays. You adjust robes. You stand for hours on end while important people perform sacred rites they don't understand and don't care about. If your arm trembles while holding a ceremonial lamp, that's a mark against you. If the sleeve of your robe brushes against a noble's gown, you may be slapped in front of everyone. Public humiliation is common. Sometimes it's planned, used to demonstrate discipline. Other times it's spontaneous, used to demonstrate dominance. Finally, you return to your quarters. Not to rest, to clean, to fold, to prep for tomorrow. You might get a few hours of sleep. You might not. Someone might wake you in the middle of the night to fetch a forgotten item or relay a message. You respond with, "Yes, honoured one," even if your limbs barely work. There are no hours that belong to you. Time itself is a borrowed thing. And throughout it all, you're expected to smile. Not a full smile, that would be presumptuous, but a polite, unobtrusive, slightly subservient expression that suggests you're content with your place in the cosmic order. You're not, but the alternative is worse. You have seen what happens to eunuchs who complain, reassigned, flogged, locked away, or simply erased from the schedule and never seen again. Humiliation is not a punishment here. It's part of the routine. It's baked into the architecture, woven into the protocols, enforced by centuries of imperial logic. You are reminded every hour, every task, every bowed head and burning knee that you are replaceable, that you are invisible unless needed, that your pain is expected, that your dignity is not. And heaven help you if you forget to bow low enough. The palace is quiet, but it is never still. Every word spoken, every look exchanged, every cup poured or scroll handed off, none of it happens in a vacuum. There is always an audience. Sometimes it's official, a superior watching for error, a scribe pretending not to eavesdrop, a guard leaning too close to the wall. But more often, it's unofficial. Spies are everywhere. You don't always know who they are, but you know they're watching. It could be the laundry boy. It could be the concubine's maid. It could be the gardener trimming chrysanthemums with suspicious frequency. You can never be sure. Everyone is lying. Not maliciously, at least not always. It's just that truth in the Forbidden City is a liability. Knowing the truth is dangerous. Repeating it is worse. So instead, people deal in rumours, misdirections, and carefully worded half-truths. You learn quickly to say only what you must, to ask only what can't be used against you, to speak in circles, nod strategically, and develop the uncanny ability to sound helpful while revealing absolutely nothing. It's not considered dishonesty, it's considered survival. The ministers hate the eunuchs. They say it's because eunuchs lack virtue, which is a polite way of saying they lack the traditional markers of Confucian manhood, sons, land, and generational continuity. In reality, they hate you because you're close to the emperor physically and politically. You can go places they can't. You overhear things they never will. You stand behind the throne while they wait outside in the cold. And they don't like that, not one bit. The palace women hate you too. At best, you are a reminder of what happens when a man becomes expendable. At worst, you're an informant, a gatekeeper, or a wall between them and the emperor's favour. They don't trust you, and to be fair, you don't trust them either. Some of them are kind, or at least pretend to be. They offer you sweets, compliments, soft conversation. And maybe it's sincere, but maybe it's bait. Maybe there's something in the treat. Maybe the compliment is being overheard. Maybe she just needs a disposable ally in her next attempt to sabotage the favoured concubine. The other eunuchs are no better. You're all competitors, no matter how friendly the smiles. One day, you're folding robes beside someone. The next day, they're reporting you for taking too long in the storeroom or forgetting to bow fast enough. You trade gossip the way merchants trade silver. Cautiously, strategically, with one hand always hovering near the dagger. Allies are temporary. Enemies are permanent. No one forgets a slight, and no one misses an opportunity to move up when someone else falls down. Sometimes it's subtle, a misplaced scroll, an overheard comment, a few extra duties quietly assigned after a complaint was whispered into the right ear. Other times it's bold, accusations of theft, questions about loyalty, a sudden reassignment to a lower post without explanation. You learn that punishment doesn't always come from the top. Sometimes it comes sideways, from someone who simply had more friends this week than you did. And then there's poison, real poison, the kind that smells like nothing, or worse, the kind that smells like almonds. Not that you always get a warning. Sometimes it just tastes a little off. Sometimes you collapse before dessert. Most times you don't know until it's far too late. Poison is the weapon of choice in the Forbidden City because it's clean. No blood, no mess, just a quiet exit and a replacement eunuch waiting in the wings. That's the thing about being part of a system this massive. No one is irreplaceable. You check your food, you watch the servants who bring it, you pretend not to notice when someone else refuses theirs. If you're smart, you cultivate favours with the kitchen staff. If you're smarter, you grow your own herbs in a pot by your quarters and make your own tea. No one drinks from someone else's cup. No one eats the first bite without hesitation. Even the emperor has tasters. You, of course, are not important enough to warrant one. Your tongue is your own protection until it isn't. Information is power, and power is currency. You gather it in whispers. Who visited which chamber late at night? Which official had too much wine at the feast? Which concubine has been sending gifts to which noble's cousin? You remember it all because one day it might save you, or destroy someone else. The same fact can be used both ways depending on how you phrase it. Sometimes you're told to pass messages between parties, between ministers and their mistresses, between concubines and distant relatives, between eunuchs in rival departments. You become the silent courier of secrets, the whisperer behind doors, the bridge between lies. You carry these words like blades, unsheathed, pointed, and ready to be used by or against you. You never forget who said what. You just pretend you did. And then there's the pillow talk. Not yours, obviously. You're not exactly in a position to have that kind of conversation, but the kind you overhear. You're often stationed near the inner quarters. You assist in dressing and undressing. You light the candles. You help the emperor prepare for his nightly visit to a concubine's chamber. And sometimes you help him stumble back afterward. And through it all, you hear things. Little things, names, accusations, requests for favours, rumours of discontent, plots wrapped in silk and whispered through gritted teeth. You don't repeat what you hear, not immediately. You wait, you file it away, you watch to see who wins and who disappears. Then if it's useful, you mention it, quietly, strategically, to the right person at the right time. If you're wrong, you say it was a misunderstanding. If you're right, well, that's one fewer rival in the courtyard. You begin to notice patterns. Who's rising, who's falling, who smiles too much, who stops eating, who gets promoted after someone else is reassigned. You start to see the palace, not as a structure, but as an organism, breathing, shifting, constantly digesting those who live inside it. You don't have to outrun the system. You just have to avoid being noticed by it too much. Stay useful, stay quiet, stay suspicious, and above all, stay alive. There's a strange quiet that follows you wherever you go, and it's not the reverent kind. It's the uneasy kind, the silence people give to things they don't quite understand. You feel it in the glances that linger just a second too long. You hear it in the way people address you with words that are technically polite but emotionally hollow. You've been stripped of more than just your anatomy. You've been removed from the categories people know how to handle. You're not a man, not in the way society defines one. But you're certainly not a woman either. You exist in a narrow, uncomfortable space in between, and no one knows what to do with you there, not even you. Other men, whole men, look at you with a mixture of disgust and relief. Disgust because you're a living reminder of what could be taken from them. Relief because it wasn't. You make them uncomfortable. You're a challenge to their status, a question mark where there should be an exclamation point. You're harmless, they say, but they don't believe it. You can move freely in places they can't. You hear things they never will. That alone is enough to make them uneasy. To them, you are unnatural. Something altered, something broken. They don't say it aloud. They don't need to. Their eyes do all the work. Women, on the other hand, treat you like something cursed, not out of cruelty, but caution. You're allowed near them, and that's the problem. In a society where access to women is tightly controlled, your presence is a loophole. You're close enough to hear whispered conversations, to carry messages between chambers, to brush against them while adjusting a robe or lighting a lantern. But you're never one of them. You're not invited into their confidence, not truly. You're always adjacent, tolerated but never embraced. You're something they use when they must, then forget when they can. You learn not to speak unless spoken to. You learn to keep your eyes down, even when you're being spoken about. Sometimes you're complimented, but it's rarely sincere. Sometimes you're mocked, but it's always indirect. The insults come in soft tones, feminized names, playful slurs, dismissive gestures. You are the target of every joke that starts with, "Well, at least I'm still a man." And you laugh. You always laugh, because laughing means you're safe, or at least pretending to be. In the Imperial records, you barely exist. Your name might appear on a roster or a payroll list, but your life, your thoughts, your fears, your voice is absent. Historians don't write about eunuchs unless we did something scandalous. Even then, we're not described as people. We're obstacles, villains, cautionary tales. The official language refers to you as the eunuch official or the palace servant, as though the role itself is more real than the person who lived it. Your story is inconvenient, so it's left out. You spend your days serving a system that demands you be nothing, and your nights wondering if there's anything left of you to save. You look in the mirror, if you're lucky enough to have one, and you see someone unfinished. Not quite masculine, not quite feminine, not quite human in the way the world expects. Your face softens, your body changes, time reshapes you into something strange. You don't look like the others your age. Your voice may rise, your skin may smooth. You develop an androgynous quality that makes people pause, squint, and move on quickly. Some eunuchs lean into it. They cultivate elegance, refinement, a certain theatrical grace. They speak in high, lilting voices and let people wonder what exactly they are. Others go the opposite way, clinging to masculinity with rigid posture and clipped speech, hoping to remind the world and themselves that they were once something else. Both paths are defences. Both are exhausting. Inside, the confusion runs deeper. You still feel desire, but it has nowhere to go. You still feel pride, but there's nothing to be proud of. You still feel grief, but no one acknowledges your loss. No funeral was held for the person you used to be, but they're gone all the same. What remains is an echo, something hollowed out, repurposed, and wrapped in ceremonial fabric. You're not even allowed to mourn properly. What would you say? I miss being whole? That would imply you're not whole now, and that's treasonously ungrateful. So you pretend it doesn't matter. You throw yourself into duty. You repeat the daily rituals with mechanical precision. You memorize titles and bowing angles and the preferred tea temperatures of every official on your route. You become efficient, useful, dependable. You learn to vanish in plain sight. Because if you slow down long enough to think about it, about who you were, about who you might have been, you might unravel. And unraveling is a luxury reserved for people with futures. The palace rewards silence and punishes introspection. You've seen what happens to eunuchs who start to feel too deeply. They grow restless, they speak out, they ask questions, and soon they're gone. Reassigned, removed, buried under a charge of misconduct or disloyalty, or, if the accusations are generous, emotional instability. You learn from them. You push the questions down. You lock them behind routines and rituals, and the quiet lie that none of it ever bothered you. And yet, sometimes, late at night, when the corridors are still and the lamps have gone out, you wonder. Not aloud, of course, just inside. You wonder if your existence is more than a function, if you're more than the sum of what was taken from you, if perhaps there's a version of you somewhere, in another life, in another world, that wasn't turned into this. Someone who could walk freely, love openly, speak honestly, and be seen. But then you wake up, you dress, you bow, you pour the tea, and you remind yourself that hope is more dangerous than poison. Climbing the palace hierarchy is less like ascending a ladder and more like tiptoeing across a tightrope over a pit full of knives. And still, some eunuchs do it. A few manage to rise above the endless ranks of foot washers and robe folders to grasp real influence. They don't just carry messages anymore, they compose them. They don't just serve tea, they choose who gets to drink it. One or two might even speak directly into the emperor's ear. And when they do, everyone else listens, because no one gets that close without wielding something sharp, even if it's only words. But here's the part the stories leave out. If you rise alone. And once you've risen, everyone else will try to pull you back down. Jealousy is not an abstract concept in the palace. It's a full-time occupation. Your peers, who used to scrub floors beside you, now resent you for standing. Your superiors, who once overlooked you, now obsess over your every move. Every favour you receive becomes ammunition. Every nod from the emperor becomes a liability. They start watching you not because they admire you, but because they're waiting for you to slip. And you will. Everyone does. To become a high-ranking eunuch, you have to do more than obey. You have to scheme. You have to align yourself with factions, flatter the right concubine, undercut the right official, and survive the fallout when the wind shifts. You might gain control over the Imperial seal, which means nothing leaves the Emperor's desk without your hand on it. You might oversee the court archives, or the palace treasury, or the Bureau of Ceremonies. But power doesn't come with security, it comes with exposure. Every task you take over from someone else creates an enemy. Every success makes you a target. Even the Emperor is dangerous, especially the Emperor. His favour is the sun that feeds your position, and it will burn you alive if you linger in it too long. He expects loyalty, but not visibility, usefulness, but not ambition. If you appear too competent, too knowledgeable, too essential, he might start to wonder whether he's still the one in charge. And emperors, historically, don't enjoy being outshone by their servants. So you learn to walk a very fine line. You make suggestions instead of giving orders. You say perhaps instead of definitely. You keep your ideas vague enough to be denied, and your opinions soft enough to dissolve in the air. When something goes wrong, you take the blame. When something goes right, you give the credit away. It's not humility, it's insurance. And still, the higher you go, the more dangerous the air becomes. Rumours start to circle like vultures. You've grown too rich. You're sleeping with someone you shouldn't be. You're plotting to replace the emperor. You poisoned the last advisor. You've sold palace secrets to foreign diplomats. It doesn't have to be true. It doesn't even have to be believable. It just has to be repeated enough times, in the right ears. That's all it takes for an honoured servant to become an enemy of the state. The fall, when it comes, is fast. One day, you're running meetings. The next, you're missing. Your chambers are emptied. Your robes are burned. Your name is scraped off the record boards. If you're lucky, you're demoted. If you're not, you're beheaded. If the emperor really wants to make a point, your body is paraded through the streets as a warning. The message is simple. No one gets to be indispensable. And yet people keep climbing, because for a eunuch it's the only kind of power you'll ever have. You'll never own land, never have heirs, never retire to a country estate. Your legacy is whatever influence you can gather before you're replaced by someone younger, hungrier, and more willing to take risks. So you reach for it, carefully, desperately, sometimes recklessly, because it's better to burn in the sun than rot in the shadows. Some eunuchs become infamous, names that live on in history, usually for all the wrong reasons. They're blamed for corruption, for decadence, for the downfall of dynasties. Officials write treatises about their wickedness. Scholars blame them for the emperor's failures. It's a convenient narrative. The emperor remains the son of heaven. The eunuch becomes the devil who whispered in his ear. People prefer their villains tidy and castrated, apparently. But most eunuchs, even powerful ones, are forgotten. Their rise is quiet, their fall quieter. No biographies, no tombs, no grandchildren to light incense for their spirit tablet. Maybe a rumour survives, some whispered story about the eunuch who defied a prince or rescued a scroll or orchestrated a scandal, but there's no way to know if it was even you. Memory in the palace is a fragile thing. It bends, warps, and disappears on command. And through it all, the cycle continues. Another eunuch rises, another one falls. The throne remains, the knives remain. The same roles are played by new bodies, with the same hopes, the same fears, the same inevitable ending. If you're lucky, you'll die in your bed, still in favour. If you're really lucky, no one will mention your name at all, because the higher you rise, the closer you sleep to the knife, and the sharper it gets, the more they think you matter. They call it a privilege, a rare honour. You are one of the few allowed into the most secretive and jealously guarded part of the Forbidden City, the inner palace, the harem, the Imperial women's quarters. It is a place no ordinary man may ever see, and no nobleman may enter without a direct Imperial summons. And yet, you walk those halls freely. You open their doors, you serve their meals, you help them dress, deliver their messages, arrange their appointments, fetch their silks, and stand quietly beside them as they cry into their sleeves. You are everywhere and nowhere, necessary and invisible. You're told this is power, that to serve among the emperor's consorts is a high post, a sacred one. You are trusted. You are closer to the heart of the empire than most ministers will ever be. And in a way, it's true. The women of the palace hold more influence than the outside world suspects. And you are in the thick of it, positioned like a hinge between their world and the emperor's. You carry their words and their moods, and sometimes their fates. You know which concubine has the emperor's attention this week. You know who's fallen out of favour. You know who's plotting, who's praying, and who's quietly wasting away. But none of it is yours. You do not belong here, not really. You may walk their corridors, but you are not welcome at their tables. You may hold their robes, but you will never share their lives. You are too close to be ignored and too alien to be embraced. You are not a man, and therefore not a threat, but also not a woman, and therefore not family. You're a fixture, a tool, a necessary presence that makes everyone a little uncomfortable when they think too hard about what you used to be. Still, you're useful, indispensable even. You know the routines. You know how to calm a temper, how to disappear during a scandal, how to clean up the mess when someone screams too loudly or faints too dramatically. You know how to write discreet letters for someone who was never taught to write for herself. You know how to smuggle out a pouch of medicine, or a note to a former lover, or an unsigned poem meant to win back the emperor's favour. You learn quickly that privilege, here, means exposure. Exposure to every raw emotion that life in gilded captivity can produce. And there is so much emotion. The women of the inner palace are dressed in beauty, but bound by loneliness. They live in luxury and die in boredom. Most will never see the emperor more than once. Some will never see him at all. Their entire lives revolve around catching the attention of a man they cannot approach, cannot speak to unless summoned, and cannot forget. They are raised for this one chance to charm, to beguile, to produce an heir. And when that fails, they are slowly discarded, one cold season at a time. You are there for the aftermath. You see the tantrums and the breakdowns, the whispered threats, and the deliberate overdoses. You are handed the torn letters and the broken hairpins. You collect the empty medicine bowls, smile through the insults, and keep your mouth shut about what you saw in the corridor after dusk. Because that's your job. That's the privilege. You are the ghost in their chambers, the shadow at their side, the ear that hears and the mouth that never speaks. Sometimes you're asked to help in more delicate matters. A pregnancy that shouldn't have happened. A visitor who shouldn't have entered. A scandal that must not reach the emperor's ears. You burn letters. You move jewellery. You alter records. You lie skillfully and often. And you never ask questions, not because you don't have them, but because you know what happens to eunuchs who get too curious. You become a connoisseur of secrets. You know which noble daughter was forced into the palace for political reasons. You know who has a sister outside who sends her food, or news, or hope. You know who's ill and pretending otherwise, who's ill and doesn't care, and who's not ill at all, but just wants someone to notice she still exists. You are a walking archive of personal tragedies, and the only thing more exhausting than holding them is knowing you can never share them. Sometimes one of the women will treat you kindly. A kind word, a smile, a gift slipped quietly into your hand. It means something. It always does. Maybe she wants information. Maybe she wants protection. Maybe she's just lonely. You try not to get attached. That's the first mistake. A eunuch who gets emotionally involved is a eunuch who ends up reassigned, if he's lucky, or quietly eliminated if he isn't. Because in the end, you are not an equal. You are not even a servant in the traditional sense. You are a buffer, a silent, neutered witness to lives unravelling in slow motion. Your body grants you access. Your silence ensures your survival. But your presence is always conditional. One mistake, one accusation, one bad look, and the doors close to you forever. Or worse, they remain open just long enough for someone to make an example out of you. So yes, you have access. You know things others don't. You stand in rooms where laws are born and lives are decided. You see the empire from the inside out, perfumed rot and its lacquered desperation. But you will never touch the levers of power yourself. You are the messenger, the errand boy, the quiet intermediary. And when you're no longer needed, someone else will be assigned your duties, wear your robes, and pretend they never noticed your name was scratched off the ledger last week. A eunuch's privileges are not really privileges. They are vulnerabilities dressed in silk, and none of it belongs to you. There's no ceremony for growing old in the Forbidden City. No gold watch, no warm farewell, no gentle reassignment to a less demanding post so you can ease into a dignified retirement. There's just the slow, steady process of being forgotten. At first you notice little things. The aches that used to fade overnight now linger for days. The steps that used to feel automatic now require thought. Your eyesight blurs more often. Your hands tremble just slightly. You make excuses for yourself. Bad sleep, a long shift, the cold. But deep down, you know what's happening. Your body's beginning to betray you. It starts earlier for eunuchs than for most. The castration doesn't just take what you lost on the table, it takes everything that was supposed to come later. You don't get the natural hormonal balance that allows for steady muscle, strong bones, or internal repair. Your bones become brittle. Your skin softens and thins. You lose muscle without even trying. The joints in your knees, already ruined from a lifetime of bowing, begin to swell and creak like warped floorboards. You get winded climbing stairs. You forget names, tasks, faces. You begin to notice how cold the winters have become and how little you feel in your fingers. Your appearance changes too. The softening features, the greying skin, the loss of youthful posture. People used to nod at you in the corridor. Now they look past you. You used to be greeted. Now you're avoided. You're no longer the promising young eunuch assigned to a rising official or a favoured concubine. You are the limp that walks by in the evening, the mutterer at the corner of the courtyard, the hunched figure folding robes with fingers that shake too much to tie the sashes correctly. You're not reassigned out of kindness. You're reassigned because someone younger, quicker, and cheaper has shown up. The new eunuchs arrive with smooth faces, sharp eyes, and the enthusiasm of someone who still thinks this place might save them. They look at you and see a warning. Or worse, they see a joke. You hear the word relic whispered behind your back. You see the way they rush to complete tasks before you can. Not out of respect, but to make you unnecessary. It works. Eventually, you're moved to less visible work. Record keeping in a damp storeroom, laundry folding in the outer quarters, gate assignments far from the court, where your slowness won't be noticed by anyone important. No one says it's because you're failing. They call it a new opportunity, a better fit, a chance to mentor the younger staff. But everyone knows what it is. You've entered the long decline. There's no medical care beyond what you can scavenge, no physician assigned to you. The court doctors are for nobles, concubines, and ministers. If you collapse, they'll check to see if you're obstructing anything important. Otherwise, they leave you be. The palace doesn't waste resources on those it no longer finds useful. You wrap your knees in cloth, soak your hands in cold water, and chew bitter herbs for your stomach aches. It helps sometimes, other times it doesn't. You start to see more of the others like you, older eunuchs who've slipped out of rotation. They huddle in the quieter courtyards during the day, talking in low tones, remembering names of concubines who haven't been seen in years. They sit with their backs against the warmest wall, faces tilted toward the sun, trying to soak in enough light to get through the evening. No one else notices them. No one really wants to. They're reminders of where this job leads, and most eunuchs would rather pretend it leads somewhere else. There's a sadness to it, but also a kind of resignation. You begin to feel the weight of the years you've spent here, not just in your body, but in your mind. You think about how long it's been since you saw the sky outside the walls, how many years have passed since anyone called you by the name you were born with. You don't even know if your family's still alive or if they remember you. You wouldn't recognize them now anyway. You've become something else entirely, and then comes the final humiliation. Not the pain, not the solitude, but the irrelevance. One day, someone asks you for help finding a scroll. You tell them exactly where it is. They ignore you and find it themselves. Another time, you offer to carry a tray. Someone younger takes it from you with a smile that barely hides its pity. Your advice isn't needed. Your stories are outdated. Your presence is tolerated until it isn't. You are no longer the right hand, the trusted ear, the valued hand behind the curtain. You're just in the way. No one tells you when it's time to leave. There is no announcement. One day, your name stops appearing on the duty list. Your meals come late. Your room isn't cleaned. Your replacement nods politely, then takes over your spot. And so you drift to the margins, physically, socially, spiritually. You still wake at the same time. You still dress. You still report for tasks that never arrive. But you know, and everyone else knows, that you're just waiting now. Waiting for your body to finish what the palace has already started. Some eunuchs die quietly in their beds. Others slip and fall in the snow, or catch a fever, or fade away after years of aching joints and failed organs. When it happens, there's no mourning. Maybe a younger eunuch mutters a blessing. Maybe someone folds your robe and lays it on your mat out of habit. But the palace doesn't pause. It doesn't notice. You are not missed, you are replaced. And when a new eunuch takes your room, he'll wonder who lived there before him. Someone might mention your name, or they might not. Maybe the record clerk will forget to write it down. Maybe it'll be copied wrong. Maybe, by the end of the week, the only proof you ever existed is a set of calligraphy brushes with slightly frayed tips and a robe that smells faintly of old sweat and camphor. There's no retirement plan here, just quiet decay. For most of history, eunuchs were expected to bow, obey, and vanish quietly when no longer needed. And for the most part, they did. But not always. Sometimes a eunuch has enough of the beatings, the whispers, the forced invisibility, and the daily reminders that he is both indispensable and disposable. Sometimes the man behind the ceremonial robe remembers that he still has a brain and a lifetime's worth of secrets. And once in a while, history reaches one of those rare boiling points where obedience cracks, silence becomes strategy, and the knives start pointing the other way. The Forbidden City might look serene, but beneath the paint and poetry, it's one of the most toxic political environments ever constructed. And eunuchs, shoved into every hallway, every court office, and every private chamber, have always been its most overlooked weapon. When you're everywhere, listening, watching, recording, delivering, it doesn't take long to realize how much power you could have if you simply stopped handing it over. And in certain dynasties, some eunuchs did exactly that. The Tang dynasty was one of the earliest cautionary tales. Near the end of its reign, eunuchs weren't just servants, they were kingmakers. One eunuch, Gao Lishi, became so powerful that he outlived multiple emperors and held more influence than entire noble families. Another, Yu Chaoan, commanded armies, literally. He had his own palace guard and used them liberally to remove ministers who got in his way. Eventually, the throne became a kind of ceremonial seat, while eunuchs ran the bureaucracy from behind silk screens. It didn't end well. When the dynasty began to fall apart, guess who got blamed first? The Ming dynasty, centuries later, perfected the art of the eunuch autocracy. One name, in particular, still echoes through Chinese history like a whisper laced with arsenic. Wei Zhongxian, a low-born eunuch who rose through sheer manipulation, bribery, and shameless self-promotion, Wei managed to become de facto ruler of China during the reign of the Tianqi Emperor. A ruler who, to put it mildly, didn't much care for ruling. Wei appointed fellow eunuchs to hundreds of key positions, purged anyone who opposed him, and rewrote court rituals to include worship of himself. Not metaphorically, literally. Temples were built in his honor. His name was chanted in public ceremonies. Even for palace standards, it was excessive. But that's the thing about unchecked power. It doesn't go unnoticed for long. When the Tianqi Emperor died, so did Wei's protection. The new emperor had him arrested, disgraced, and eventually driven to suicide. His legacy, an entire generation of eunuchs hunted down, demoted, or executed just to scrub away the stain of his influence. And yet, despite this backlash, the system didn't change. Not really, because no matter how many heads rolled, the court still needed people who could be trusted to live inside the palace, keep secrets, and serve without heirs or outside loyalties. That's the paradox at the heart of every eunuch rebellion. The court creates the conditions. It trains you to observe, to manipulate, to endure. Then it acts surprised when someone puts those skills to use. The palace arms its eunuchs with information, proximity, and desperation, and then wonders why some of them start playing chess with real people. The surprise isn't that rebellions happen. The surprise is that they don't happen more often. But these rebellions, if you can call them that, never last. The system is built to absorb them. Even when eunuchs take power, they do so through the existing machinery. They use the bureaucracy, the rituals, the paper seals and appointment scrolls. They don't tear the palace down. They simply rearrange who sits where. And when their time runs out, and it always runs out, the next emperor resets the game. The eunuchs are purged, the records are burned, A few reforms are passed to make sure it never happens again, and then the machinery starts turning once more. There is no lasting monument to a eunuch rebellion, no statue, no holiday, no chapter in the school books titled "The Time the Servants Took Over." If you're remembered at all, it's as a cautionary tale, a warning, a footnote in someone else's story. Your rise is always seen as unnatural, your fall inevitable. You might govern an empire, but you will never be given credit for stabilizing it. You will always be accused of corrupting it. And yet for those brief windows in history, eunuchs have shown what happens when the voiceless start to speak, when the sideline seize the throne, when the shadows move without asking permission. You may have started as a functionary, a body made useful by subtraction, but that doesn't mean you're incapable of ambition, or rage, or revenge. You think back to the older eunuchs in the courtyard, the ones who shuffled quietly, smiled politely, and said almost nothing. You wonder how many of them once stood closer to the emperor than any general or minister. You wonder how many were quietly demoted after flying too close to power. You wonder how many were simply waiting, watching, remembering. Because that's what eunuchs do best. They endure. And every so often, when the cracks in the court grow wide enough, they slip through. They rise, they rule, and for a moment, just a moment, they remind the empire that nothing is more dangerous than someone who has nothing left to lose. But no matter how high you climb, the fall is coming. The backlash, the cleansing, the forgetting. The system will take your name off the scroll, scrub your face from the mural, and assign your position to someone younger, quieter, and more obedient. History will call it reform. You'll call it erasure, because in the Forbidden City, the knives always find their way back to the sheath. You've served the court for decades. You've bowed, knelt, and smiled through humiliation. You've carried secrets like a shadow and endured pain that would have broken others. You've outlived emperors, weathered purges, and survived long enough to see yourself fade into irrelevance. And when death finally comes, quietly, mercifully, in your sleep or otherwise, surely you think, surely you've earned at least a dignified end. A ceremony, a proper name on a proper tablet. Something to mark that you are here. But no, even in death the palace has one last reminder. You were never truly a person. You were a role, a function, and now that function has ended. There's no funeral procession, no elaborate mourning rituals, no ancestral tomb to be tended by dutiful descendants. Most eunuchs die without fanfare, often alone, often forgotten. When your body is found, if it's found at all, it will be removed discreetly. There's a process for this, of course. The palace is nothing if not organised. Your name is logged. Your possessions, few and shabby, are inventoried or discarded. Your sleeping mat is replaced. Your room is swept. By sundown, someone else might already be assigned your quarters. If you held rank or favour at the time of your death, there may be a modest ceremony. A few words read from a scroll, your name spoken with ritualised indifference. Someone might even burn incense. But these gestures are not for you. They are for appearances, for the court, for the emperor, for the illusion that loyalty is remembered. In truth, they mean nothing. A eunuch's life is measured in service hours, not sentiment. Once those hours are over, the ledger closes. If you were low-ranking or had fallen from grace, you don't get a ceremony at all. Your body is removed through the servant's gate and taken beyond the walls. There's a burial ground for eunuchs, of course, but calling it a cemetery would be generous. It's a field of shallow pits outside the capital. There are no markers, no gravestones, no monuments, just earth, packed and repacked with bodies no one wants to remember. You are lowered in with others like you, some known, most anonymous, and covered without comment. It is efficient, it is clean. It is as if you never existed. Your family, if they're still alive, may not claim you. In many cases, they aren't allowed to. The stigma lingers. To be related to a eunuch is to be tainted by association, proof that your bloodline failed to produce a proper man. And even if they wanted to retrieve your remains, they likely wouldn't know where to find you. The palace keeps few public records of your movements, and fewer still of your death. Officially, you served with distinction. Unofficially, you faded into nothing. There are exceptions, of course. A handful of powerful eunuchs, those who reached the heights of court influence, were buried with splendour. Tombs, inscriptions, even honorary titles. But these cases are rare, and even then their graves were often defaced or desecrated by later regimes, eager to distance themselves from the shame of allowing a eunuch to hold power. Statues are toppled, names are erased, histories rewritten. The few who are allowed to be remembered are often remembered for the wrong reasons, as tyrants, manipulators, symbols of corruption. Their service becomes a scandal, their legacy a warning. You will not be remembered in poetry. No songs will be written about your loyalty, your patience, your resilience. You will not be mentioned in textbooks, except perhaps as a footnote beneath a political controversy. A eunuch official, the text might read, played a role in this affair. No name, no detail, no sense that you were once a living, breathing person who endured unimaginable pain just to be allowed into the room. There is no shrine for you, no descendant to burn incense in your name during the annual festivals. Ancestral worship, the beating heart of traditional Chinese afterlife belief, is a luxury you don't have. You had no children, no lineage. There is no one to carry your spirit forward. In the cosmic bureaucracy of the dead, you are unregistered, unspoken for, unanchored. Your ghost, if it lingers, does so without direction, without offerings, without a place to return to, a hungry soul in a forgotten field. And yet, the palace needs you. It always did. It needed your silence, your endurance, your willingness to live without legacy. You made the court function. You served the meals, recorded the decrees, cleaned the robes, lit the candles. You saw what no one else was allowed to see, and you did it all without expectation of reward. Your loyalty was never supposed to be honoured. It was supposed to be assumed. And when it ends, there's no thank you. Only a new name on the duty roster. Sometimes a young eunuch asks what happens after death. The older ones don't answer. Not because they don't know, but because there's nothing comforting to say. You die, and you're gone. You might be missed for a day, a week. Then someone else wears your robe, carries your tray, learns your roots. Your name slips from memory like water off a tile roof. Forgotten not out of malice, but out of routine, out of necessity. The palace doesn't pause. The system cannot afford to mourn. And in that silence, in that erasure, lies the final joke. You gave everything, your body, your identity, your years, for a place that never intended to keep you. Even in death, you are not a person. You are an afterthought, an administrative inconvenience, a corpse that needs to be moved before the morning shift arrives. No epilogue, no eulogy, no echo, just the end. Looking back, it's tempting to try and find meaning in it all. After everything, the blood, the silence, the obedience, you want to believe it added up to something. That the years you spent bowing, kneeling, serving, and fading were in service of a greater purpose. That your sacrifices were necessary. That your life, even if small, was part of a larger design. But that's the kind of thinking the palace loves. It doesn't reward meaning. It rewards compliance. You didn't live a meaningful life in the eyes of the court. You lived a useful one. And when that usefulness ended, so did your relevance. Maybe you lived longer than a farmer. It's true that life outside the palace is brutal. Drought, war, disease, back-breaking labour from sunrise to dusk. You didn't break your back in a rice paddy or freeze in a mountain village. You weren't drafted into the military, marched to the borderlands, and left to die defending a piece of land you'd never seen. You had food, not always good food, but food. You had shelter, not always warm shelter, but a roof. You had access to the heart of the empire. but you never had a say in how that heart beat. Yes, you lived near power, but you were never allowed to touch it. You carried messages you didn't write. You served food you didn't eat. You witnessed decisions that shaped kingdoms, but you weren't permitted to speak into them. At most, you nudged outcomes behind the scenes, adjusted the mood of a concubine, whispered a small truth to an official, delayed a letter by half a day, enough to feel like you mattered, never enough to prove that you did. You existed on the margins of history, close enough to smell its breath, never close enough to leave your mark. And even that proximity came at a cost. You gave up your body. You gave up family, legacy, identity. You gave up the chance to be seen as fully human. What you received in return was not freedom, but containment. A carefully curated existence where every moment was prescribed, every gesture trained, every emotion hidden. You were not allowed to love, not allowed to hope, not allowed to age with dignity. And when you died, you were replaced before your body cooled. You might try to tell yourself it wasn't all bad. There were moments of beauty, lantern festivals in the courtyards, winter snow falling over golden rooftops, a kind word from someone who saw you not as a role, but as a person. Maybe you laughed once or twice. Maybe you formed a friendship, however brief. Maybe someone remembered your name, even if only for a season. You cling to those moments like threads, trying to weave something comforting from them, but they don't change the truth. You were never meant to be part of the story. You were meant to keep the story running. Dynasties rose and fell, and you were there, sweeping the halls, delivering the tea, listening as emperors whispered commands that would rewrite maps and end lives. You were always there, but no one ever wrote you into the tale. No historian will mention you. No folk song will carry your story. The public won't remember that the emperor's seal was held by a hand that once trembled over a bamboo tube. The victories will be credited to generals, the scandals to ministers, the legacy to bloodlines. You were wallpaper, beautiful, intricate, essential, and utterly unnoticed. No one thanks the wallpaper. No one wonders how many hands it took to hang it, or how many hours were spent making sure the pattern lined up just right. They just look at it, nod politely, and walk past. You were part of the palace's visual harmony. You existed so others could shine brighter, and yet there's a strange kind of dignity in that. Not the kind you put on a statue or carve into a stone. A quieter dignity, one that comes from endurance. You were handed a role, brutal, dehumanizing, thankless, and you played it without breaking. You survived a system designed to grind you into silence. You carried more than your share, and you did it all without applause, without reward, and without anyone knowing how hard it was to keep your voice steady when your knees gave out, or your hands trembled, or your spirit began to slip. Perhaps that's the most human thing about you, not your suffering, but your ability to keep moving in spite of it, to get up each day, put on the robe, perform the ritual, and pretend it still mattered. Maybe that's not heroic, maybe it's just habit, but maybe habit is what heroism looks like in a place where grand gestures get you killed. You were not a man, not a woman, not a master, not a slave. You were something in between, something the palace never had a word for. You were the breath between commands, the silence between songs, the space between the emperor's footsteps and the echo that followed. No one will build a temple in your honor, but you already knew that. And that's the end of tonight's long walk through the polished corridors and quiet indignities of a eunuch's life in Imperial China. From the knife that began it all to the slow, unnoticed disappearance at the end, you were never meant to be remembered, just useful. You weren't part of the empire's story. You held the ink, turned the pages, and were erased between the lines. Thanks for drifting through history with me. If you're still awake, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment about which part of eunuch life would have broken you first. The endless kneeling, the invisible politics, or the knowledge that none of it was ever really yours. Sleep well,